Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our second session today. This is actually going to be more of a conversation and somewhat of a pop-up because there was a change in the schedule. Alan Natachu, who's going to be talking about plain language, actually had to switch out his schedule, and he is going to be doing a session tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern. And so today we had this open spot, and Dawn Metcalf kindly sort of volunteered to lead this new conversation that we're having today. And let me just double check real quick to see. Yes, the room is filling up nicely. Oh wow, we have a bunch of folks already coming in. And so we have a panel, and the conversation is going to be about accessibility through the looking glass. And again, it's a conversation. So with that said, we do have more room on this panel for people to join. So if there's anybody out there, and I know I popped into the lounge and was sitting at Kayleen's table earlier, and there are some folks in there. If any of you want to join this panel and be a part of this conversation, I'd be happy to add you. I just need to know, and I will just invite you onto the stage, and you can be a part of this experience, this adventure we're doing with this little pop-up session. So with that, I am let's see, Daphne's saying, I love a pop-up experience. Thanks for volunteering. Does that mean you want to volunteer to join us, Daphne? Let me know, and we'll get you on. And Cyndi is volunteering. Let's see, how do I do that again? I have to add you. Let me see this. All right. Let me get that going. Oh, I know how to do that. I have to do it over here. Okay, so I'm gonna just slowly get everybody in. It takes me, it's a little confusing on how I do this, but here we go. Invite to stage. There you go. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and hide myself, and I'm gonna let the group of you do your bios and let you run this crazy thing. So here we go. Hide from stage. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so I guess we're going with that. Hi, Cyndi.
Hi.
Hello, and hello to everybody who's joining us right now. We're going to go around quickly and just introduce ourselves. I'm going to introduce myself as Dawn Metcalf. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a instructional designer and learning design writer. Chris.
Hi, everyone. I am Chris Paxton McMillin. My pronouns are she and her. I'm trying to remember my background here. I've been in this field since 98. Sounds better than actually calculating the years. And yeah, this is truly the authentic me when they last minute, yesterday, if you saw me, I actually had makeup on and my hair done. So.
We're glad to see you.
Kayleen.
Oh, here goes Daphne. So Kayleen.
Hi, I'm Kayleen Holt, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm an instructional design consultant, owner of Scissortail Creative Services. I've been in instructional design specifically since 2005, in teaching before that since 1994. So yeah, we're old. Visual description for anyone who can't see me: I'm a white woman. I'm sitting in my office with a bunch of bookshelves behind me, wearing a dark orange dress and blue glasses. So I'm going to kick it over to Cyndi now.
Hi, I'm Cyndi Nagel. I am a brown-skinned Latina. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I am a fabulous 50-plus L&D professional of over 25 years. So I'm right there with the two of you. I'm a talent development manager for Belkin International. I have experience in all kinds of training. So in a team of one right now. So that's been Daphne. Daphne.
I am Daphne. I am a brown-skinned, young-ish, very new to the space person. I feel like I am out of my sphere being up on the screen with all of you OGs. But I am super excited about this conference because I am new in this space, and I think that it is a benefit to be learning about accessibility and inclusion from the start of my journey instead of needing to add it into something that I've been doing for decades. So although I feel very out of my element on this stage, I'm happy to be up here learning with and from everyone.
No, thanks. And this is the perfect place to be. And if one thing that I've learned is that TLDC is an incredibly open and welcoming space. So you completely deserve to be here. We're all good. This is great.
Absolutely. And we need all the perspectives. It's great.
Which
to
is perfect
have you
because
here.
that's what we'll be talking about. The first thing I'm going to ask everybody, just to like jump in, we already know where you're from. You're here for the first session. So if you could put in the chat, do you like salty or sweet? This is an important conversation here. Salty or sweet? Oh, I'm seeing a lot of salty. Oh, there we go. Oh, sweet and salty. These are like the chocolate dip pretzel people. Okay.
Yes, please.
Oh, see, now everybody's going to do both now that we've opened
Salted
that up.
caramels. Okay.
Oh, yeah, the salted caramels. Those are fantastic. Perfect.
I love Shireen's comment, fried chicken. Like, all the fried chicken.
Straight to the right answer. Well, if you do like the chicken and waffles.
Oh, yes. Right? Maple syrup on fried chicken. That is where it's at.
Okay.
Yes.
This is definitely right. So exactly what I'm trying to point out here is that there's no right or wrong answer. All answers are good because you know what you like, which is really kind of the point. And when we're talking about perspective, that's what I wanted to start talking about. We act like that there's in testing, if we're coming from an education background, that there's going to be a right or wrong answer. And people are hesitant to say something that they think is the wrong answer. And especially in a space that's diversity, equity, inclusion, if we're looking at accessibility, if we're looking at plain language, people are afraid to say something because they're afraid of doing it wrong. And one of the things that I thought was important that Susie just brought up, Susie Miller, who just had an amazing first session for everybody who was there. If you're not there, catch the recording because it was amazing. One of the things that she pointed out was that it's not an us versus them conversation in accessibility. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about how we can see ourselves in this conversation, not just see it, but actually feel it and be involved in it. So if you will forgive me,
Dawn,
I'm going to, yes.
I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you real quick? We are getting lots of comments in the chat about there's like some background music or something that's making it hard to hear you.
I heard that too, but it's not from here. And it stopped.
It looks like everybody's muted now. So yeah, it stopped. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. It's when you just dive right in. You have no idea what you're going to say. What I wanted to do is have a little experiment. It's very short. There are no wrong answers. Quiz time. So be excited. All I'm going to ask you to do, and anybody who's heard me in another speaking engagement, no spoilers. So all I want you to do is I'm going to draw something, put it up on the screen, and then I want you to write down the very first word you think of when you see this. One word, not so hard. Then put it in the chat. I don't want you putting it in the chat and then everybody's seeing it and influencing each other. You all have your own perspective. That's it. Ready? Are we good? Can I have a thumbs up just to make sure that we're all ready to go on the same things? Thank you. All right, ready? So what is the first word you think of when you see this? First word. If you're thinking about it, you're thinking too hard. First word, and then stick it in the chat. Great. Thank you. Perfect. You guys are all so good at this. 100%. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So if you look on the instrument, you'll get a lot of people who write circle. It's because we were all good kindergartners and we learned about circles, which is great. Circle is a good answer. There's also some different ones that you don't say circle. They say, I think we've got hole, like a hole. I like to think of it like the cartoon ones where you put it on the wall and you put your arm right through it. Loop was another one. Loop, I think that's a zero. It's a 0 or O. I'm not sure, Chrissy. I'm sure it's one of the two. Unity from Bethany. Thank you very much. That's a great one. Do you see that? If I said this was an O or a 0, you could see that. If I said it was an orange, could you see that? Or if I said the moon, could you see that? Now, everyone's giving these answers. And here's the thing. They're all correct. They're all correct answers. And the funny thing is, I didn't change the picture at all, right? We're all seeing it differently and projecting our experience or our perspective onto this, even though it doesn't change. The really wild part is if I walked into a room and didn't ask you this and just said, you know what this is, don't you? We would all nod our head. Yeah, we know what this is. But some people would be thinking circle, and some people would be thinking O, and some people would be thinking loop, and some people would be thinking cookie. You know, this. So if you've ever had a conversation where it slowly dawns on you that you're not talking about the same thing, this is likely what is happening. This is what's happening. And when we take into account that there are different experiences that are just as valid as ours on something, it increases our understanding and also points out kind of where our own limitations are. And so this is just a quick little experiment that I use to point out that you have a valid perspective and so do other people, and they're different. And sometimes, especially in design, we have to come up with how other people could be perceiving this. And in the world of accessibility, I think it's really important to think kind of beyond the universal design and think about how it affects us personally. And so what I wanted to put out there was how to think about what we use daily in our own lives that makes things more accessible. Because I think accessibility gets weighted like a conversation that it only belongs in DEI. When I have the analogy I use is consent. Consent means to ask for permission, but the word consent has become very weighted in the conversation of Me Too and body autonomy. And it's not that it's wrong, but that's not its only meaning. And accessibility doesn't only mean for people who have a challenge on one sort of another. It means making sure that the information is available and readily accessible to everyone seeing it. So if everybody would be willing to have a discussion or thoughts about this, or about your little picture, that'd be great. My big example that I was thinking of was, I don't know about you, but when I'm home working, because I do that a lot, I have children, and it makes it very hard to attend things like this or do a training or anything online. And I am very happy to have captions so I can understand what's being said, or printing out the transcript or the slide deck so that I can look at it later and not try and have to process all the things that are happening now. Those are things that make it accessible for me, even though I don't identify as having one of those problems or challenges to overcome when normally looking at trying to access the kind of information that I want. So if anybody's willing to jump in, that's what I thought we'd talk about.
I agree with you, Dawn. Thank you for that demonstration. I also use captions, even though I'm not, it's not a requirement, but it's a preference for me. So I have a very busy mind. So captions helps me to pay closer attention, to be honest. And so that's mine.
Oh, that's right. I prefer captions too.
Yeah, I have auditory processing issues. And so even though I actually do have a small amount of hearing loss from when I was a baby, but for the most part, I can hear okay. It's just that when there's background noise or anything else, it's hard for me to filter out extraneous input, kind of like the background music we were talking about earlier, where people were saying, oh, it's hard for me to hear you. Yeah, if someone produces a learning video and it's got background music throughout with narration, no, I cannot. I can't. I can't filter out the music to hear the conversation. So anyway, yes, I use captions all the time.
And I would completely agree. I was the background music. I couldn't even hear it. And captions are great because it keeps my family sane, because otherwise I'm cranking up the TV or the radio or whatever it is so loud so I can hear it. So it helps me follow along and still feel like I'm part of the group without driving everybody nuts.
Actually, that's wild because I'm the reverse. I can't concentrate. I'm more like Kayleen. I can't concentrate if there's music and they're like, oh, if it doesn't have lyrics, it's not a problem. No. If any sound, and I'm a professional writer, and some people can do this, listening to music or having playlists or going to like Starbucks and being able to write. No, I can't do that. It has to be quiet, no distractions. Otherwise, I'm distracted.
I'm similar.
Same. I'm sorry.
One of the things that in my recent learning about all of the layers of accessibility, I think that one thing that I hadn't thought of that makes learning more accessible is choice. Just the option of having different ways to access material. And so for me, that can be, the time, the location, anything that, and that's one of the reasons I struggle with, but I also enjoy digital learning, as you were saying, Dawn, having the option to go back to something later. I am a very detail-oriented person, and I need to get sometimes the gist or the general idea is not enough for me. And so I'll make an audio recording of what I'm learning. I love having the ability to go back and watch something later to pick up on something that I may have missed. And I made a LinkedIn post yesterday about how grateful I was that yesterday Cyndi and today Luis, people have been compiling the resources as they're being shared throughout the chat. So I don't have to do that. So I don't have to, copy and paste things. I can just focus a little bit more. But yeah, for me, choice makes learning so much more accessible.
And thank you, Cyndi. Honestly, anybody who's putting this stuff up is just making it a huge difference. Although if you're like me, I think I have 50 tabs open for what I'm going to be looking at later. Computer's gotta hate me.
Bookmark.
Yes, exactly. Because there is such a wealth of information here and so many incredible conversations and contributions. It's a lot, but it's a good thing. I said about my auditory, my vision has been going more, I am also 50 something, one specifically. But as I've been getting older, my eyes have been getting worse and worse and worse, to the point that I used to joke that at least Monet could see lily pads. I could not without my glasses. And that was the basis of one of the trainings that I wanted to do when talking about ourselves into the conversation. I was fortunate enough to talk to human resource managers and some C-suite level people about how to think about accessibility in your organization. And unfortunately, everybody was like, well, you can't just appeal to being ethical and being a nice person. That doesn't work very well. You have to give the bottom line, the numbers, what are the fines and what are the costs? I said, if it was the bottom line, they would have done it by now. That's not working either. And what I find that works is empathy, and not empathy necessarily for somebody else, but empathy for yourself. What does it matter to me? And so what I asked them was, while you probably can't give me a percentage off the top of your head about either your visible or invisible disabilities, although I don't really like that phrase, and there was a better phrase earlier, and I want to use that instead and get into the habit of that. If you remember what that was, please put it in the chat. But you probably can tell me and think about how many people in your organization wear glasses or contacts. Because glasses or contacts is culturally accepted. And we don't think much about it, but what it really is an accommodation for a visual impairment. And if we took away that accommodation, if you can imagine everybody at the work no longer being allowed to wear glasses or contacts for whatever reason, we couldn't get our work done. We couldn't, I know I can't. I couldn't read my texts. I couldn't read my emails. I certainly couldn't drive. I wouldn't have very good eye contact. I would probably walk into things. It would be completely a mess, and it wouldn't have changed anyone's ability to do their jobs. Otherwise, it wouldn't change their knowledge, their experience, their reliability. But you wouldn't be able to get your work done. And when you put it that way, suddenly everyone's like, oh, accessibility is me. That relates to me and people I know. And that became to make it, I think, a bit more personable and a bit more understandable. The idea, of course, I was cruel and made my e-learning make them go through it anyway. But yes.
And I'd like to add that has evolved. Growing up, wearing glasses, had all the names, Forage, you name it. Anyway, but my eye doctor has recently, and it's probably been about 10 or 15 years, said that the trend nowadays is for people to come in, especially younger people, and get glasses with no prescription, just so that they have it. So it's a real interesting take on that.
Fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find anything that is more useful auditory, visually, or motor? Does anybody have anything to add to that?
I just think you have to be open to all of that. If we're designing training, you have to realize that I think that the typical statistic we hear is 1 in 5 people have a disability, and it's, maybe a parent, maybe not a parent. I think that number is much higher, so I think no matter what, you have to consider that somebody in the room is going to have trouble seeing your content or hearing your content or comprehending your content. So yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time, and typically I'll create a rough draft of whatever training I'm trying to design for the storyline course, whatever it is. I'll create a rough draft, and then I make myself cut 50% of the words that are in there. That's my first edit, is cut half. And any kind of younger IDs that I've had to work with or team members are like, oh my gosh, I have to take half of this out. Yes, you do. You have to simplify that much. So in my organization, that's critical because I serve a global population. So although most of our employees are in the US, I also serve, about 12 other countries. And so language is a barrier. Simple is important. The environments are all different. Some people are at home, some people are in an office, some people are at a cafe, so it's really important to consider all of those things.
Yeah, no, that I think that does go back to Daphne's point on choice.
Yeah,
it makes such a huge difference.
And I want to add to. Okay,
Go ahead.
I was going to add to Cindy's. Yeah, the CDC says 26%, but I completely agree. I think that number is going to go up because as we're creating these safe spaces,
yes,
where we can reveal that we need this help, because for so long we hid them because of fear of losing our job, being looked down upon, being called names. I mean, you name it. And hopefully as we create that safe space, I hate to say that number is going to go up, but hopefully in my long-term mind is it also kind of puts us out of a job in the sense of we won't need these conferences because everybody will realize it's the right thing to do.
Well, and that you're included. That I think that that's what I meant by when we're looking at ourselves intersectionally, that we are many things. It's just how you view yourself, and that ability to see yourself not only as a human and as a gender and as an orientation and as a race and as a religion and as a birth order and as a parenting model or whatever it is, what your job is. It also involves that I do need glasses, so I am visually impaired, or I do have a cognition processing. And so it's important to think about these things, not only for our learners, but also for ourselves, and being able to take that on as that we're part of this. I like to say that there's always a spectrum, and people make it sound like the spectrum is somebody else, but you see, if there's a spectrum, that means you're on it. We're all on the spectrum somewhere.
I think it's so interesting that I never that until you mentioned imagine not being able to wear your glasses or contacts, I didn't see myself on the spectrum in this entire journey thinking about accessibility. Yeah, I'll design courses for people who have visual impairment, but I never once thought about my own. I've worn glasses since I was 2 years old, and my eyesight is, I'm -7 in one eye and -7.75 in the other, and I am -8 is legally blind. And I never, until you said, imagine how hard it would be to do your job without glasses. I've been wearing contacts since I was 11 years old, and I just think now I can see. I mean, I wake up, I put on my contacts, and my life is accessible. I can do things, but to imagine being without them is it's really important to put ourselves into the equation, because when you think about how something affects you, then you can consider others.
And that goes
More.
into your contacts really are an accessibility tool. I mean, growing up with glasses, they didn't have the glasses now that, I mean, the kids can wear and play. And so I grew up scared of balls, I mean, I couldn't play any sports. I couldn't do anything because if I broke my glasses, I couldn't see. And with the advent of the different choices in glasses, and it is kind of becoming a fashion statement, and the contacts, that is an accessibility tool. So I think it's just a great way of looking at it.
It really is. And if we would consider that, you know, glasses are a disability accommodation, it's like you said, an accessibility tool, and how much better would the world be if all accommodations that people with disabilities needed were as easy to access and as I guess something that, you know, it's not really a thing that we think about it as glasses are. Like if ramps, assistive technology, all of these things were just things that we provide for people who need them, and we don't think anything about it, and it's not considered a burden or anything extra that we have to do. I do want to take a moment and just point out some of the really wonderful comments that are coming through the chat. Jared mentioned sensory sensitivities. Sometimes hard because people don't believe it or don't understand it. I get you, Jared. I'm very smell sensitive, and I don't just mean my allergies, which I have airborne fruit allergies, which make it really difficult for me to interact with the world because one of my allergies is caffeine. So I can't be around coffee or soda, or, you know, I can't go into a diner or even an office because coffee is everywhere. I had a medical procedure last Friday and had to take the day off because, you know, the procedure, even though it was only a few hours, I had an allergic reaction because the nurse who was giving me my IV was drinking coffee, and there was coffee at the nurse's station. And so anytime I have to go somewhere, I plan ahead for, okay, am I going to have a medical issue because of this? Because I have to be out exposed to stuff. And it's not just a sensitivity to smell in that case. It's actual like potential anaphylaxis, always allergy-induced asthma. But the smell sensitivity, it's this weird thing where there's you know, some smell in my neighbor's house will trigger me, you know, like, but so, a lot of people, you know, particularly autistic people like me, can hear electricity, stuff like that. And people do not believe that, oh, no, you can't possibly, you're making that up. But it's a real thing. Someone else, let's see, Scarlett mentioned being an ambulatory wheelchair user who often has to leave the room and return due to mobility issues and pain. So accessible transcripts and captions are essential. There's a perspective I hadn't considered yet for why we need those things. We think of transcripts and captions being useful for people with hearing disabilities and also cognitive disabilities. I have cognitive disabilities, and having transcripts to refer back to really helped me. But there's another perspective I hadn't considered. And then Carrie also mentioned that some people have trouble sitting for long periods, their pain, attention capacity, et cetera. So especially those sessions, whether virtual or in person, that go on for a long time without a break. I've been in those where people get offended if someone gets up and walks around or leaves the room. And you know what? We have to take care of ourselves. So just have to consider those things. Okay, I think I managed to get the Kara says genetic disorders and nerve damage. People don't take them seriously a lot of times because the flare-ups are intermittent and unpredictable. So recordings of virtual meetings options can be super necessary. Yeah, what I call dynamic disabilities, which is where you have flare-ups, where you can do something one day and you can't do it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a really hard time understanding that. For instance, the ambulatory wheelchair users that was mentioned earlier, is people think, we've all seen the memes and everything of someone stands up from a wheelchair and people are like, oh my gosh, miracle on all four or whatever. It's just ridiculous because yes, there are people who can walk sometimes who also use a wheelchair because of pain, whatever else. My 25-year-old non-binary daughter likes the term daughter, prefers they, them pronouns. He is a walker occasionally, and you would not believe the looks they get out in public because people see them as, okay, you're this young person. Why are you using that? Because people associate it with what old people need. And so many people think if they go to Walmart and grab the motorized carts, that they're just playing with them, or they don't really need that. We need to stop with the judgment and believe people when they tell us what they need.
And I think, again, once we have that kind of perspective, I remember I had a broken thumb, the base of my thumb and the wrist, and it was on the left. People were like, oh, thank goodness it's your left. It wasn't your dominant hand. But let me tell you, I couldn't do so many things that I mean, putting on clothes or earrings or, picking up things, washing dishes. I mean, none of these things became options. Buttoning your pants became a challenge. I mean, it's not easy to do. And that gave me an insight that I didn't have before of why I am grateful for having two hands that work. And when you have those surgical points or an injury, that gives you that perspective briefly, just briefly. But if we can touch into that, this is something that once you realize it, that somebody else has as their constant, then I think we're able to understand more. It should be just empathy. But sometimes it needs to, I think, to be brought back to an experience that people can relate to. Kayleen, you did bring in exactly the thing that I love about talking about glasses and contacts. Because there's no cultural weight on it. I understand, Chris, when we were younger, there was much more cultural weight. Now, not so much. May that be the standard. And when people say, I never thought of that before, or I hadn't considered that, or I never thought of it that way, I said, yes, that's the point. That's what we are aiming for. That's our goal. So that we don't have to think about it as anything unusual. And my eldest, is non-binary as well. They them pronouns is very easy for us. And when I get pushback on that about why or what, I have to relate it to something that they can understand. I said, well, if you have a child that says their name is Michael and they want to go by Mikey, or vice versa, do you say, no, I'm not going to call you that? Or if somebody decides to change their name when they're married, and they're like, I'm not Miss Kahan anymore, I'm Ms. Metcalf now. Do you say, no, I'm sorry, I knew you as Miss Kahan, I'm only going to call you that? Of course not. That's etiquette and unfriendly and rude. That's what it is when people give you their pronouns or their names. Should they have transitioned? You accept it and you go on. That's what we're hoping for. Oh, but I do appreciate I know that somebody's bringing up neurodiversity is a big thing for me as well. And I have a child who has the high sensory sensitivity, not just tactile, but mostly smell and taste, like a super taster or the smell. You can't use lemon, you can't use mint or cinnamon. Those will literally burn his mouth. So you can't do that. And it's like some people don't believe him. And I'm like, it's not for you to believe just because you haven't experienced that. But you say, if you've had ever really spicy food and it hurts your mouth, that's what it's like for him.
People are always shocked when I say I have a mint allergy. Yet when I went to the doctor and this developed actually just a few years ago. And when I went to the dentist was like, barely opened my mouth. He's like, oh yeah, mint allergy. It is that common that people don't know about it. And trying to find toothpaste and mouthwash and all these different things that will actually work. And then also reminding them when you get your teeth clean, please don't use mint. No, I can't have a mojito. I mean, whatever it may be. It can be challenging.
Even floss. A lot of floss has mint in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are there things that you notice that because of some challenge that you had that it's so ever present that nobody thinks about it and you have to point it out every single time? I know, Kayleen, you mentioned caffeine, having a caffeine allergy. I have a latex allergy.
And my husband has a latex allergy.
Yeah. But it was like paint. Like you were talking to doctors and nurses.
Oh.
Yes. No. Walking into a freshly painted room, and that's when I went into anaphylactic shock.
Interesting. That is okay.
Are little bits of latex. That's what it is.
Well, from my understanding, latex paint doesn't have natural rubber latex in it. So that's interesting. It looks like you may be allergic to the synthetic latex as well.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was a surprise to all. But that you don't realize that until you have that kind of experience. And then how prevalent something is, it shows up to you because it impacted you. Or like
exactly. And we just need to learn some empathy for folks. Someone in the chat, Ashley, mentioned having blood sugar issues. So when you have those days where there's not an opportunity to grab a snack or lunch or something, that can be really hard. And it can be really dangerous for some people. So we can't possibly remember all of the different health challenges that everyone in our office has unless we only work with a couple of people. But what we do need to do is, try really hard to remember those that are life-threatening for sure, and believe people when they tell you what they need. And one of the things is asking about accommodations. For years, when I would see the question about, do you need accommodations for a disability? Or actually what they would say is, do you have a disability? I would answer no, because I didn't think that I did. It can be a journey for someone with a health challenge or any sort of disability to recognize that is in fact a disability. Just like we saw Daphne say earlier, wow, I've worn glasses all my life and just didn't really think about this. Yeah, it's a disability. So they may not identify that way, and they may not be comfortable telling you, even if they do, because I can speak from experience about the discrimination that happens when people find out that you do have a disability, the limitations that are there. So basically, instead of asking, do you have a disability, and expecting people to disclose or people to tell you what they need, ask everyone, what do you need to be successful in your job? Or what do you, if you're registering people for a training, what accommodations would help you, or anything, just asking everyone what they need and making things accessible to everyone. One of the things I consider is neurodivergence. What if we designed every interview, every training opportunity, every meeting to where it's friendly for people with any sort of neurodivergence? And I'm speaking as someone who is very, very late identified autistic. that if people would just do some simple things like providing a meeting agenda in advance, letting you know if cameras are going to be required. Like that's a simple thing that reduces a lot of anxiety for people. So there are lots of different things. Not having super bright lighting or distracting noises and things like that. Lots of useful things you could do to help neurodivergent folks.
I like that you're asking about not do you identify with a disability, but what can help or what do we need? Is the light too bright or can I turn it down? Can you still see in the back of the room? Can you still see? Does anybody need? I know somebody asked to do to be able to come into a meeting, remotely, even though she was there because you're required to be there, but she did it remotely so that she could hold it to her ear and hear exactly what was happening without asking anybody to speak up. It just made it accessible for her. That's perfect. You just want to be sure, right, that everybody has it. Do you need it to have less noise? Do you need it to be louder? Do you want it to be warmer? Do you want it to be cooler? It's just a question of preference. But the preference is because that's what makes us comfortable and able to do our work, able to concentrate, able to focus, or able to be included. So that's great. I'm seeing like there's such great examples in the chat. And I'm not trying to say that I want to, I'm trying to think of a good word to downplay, like there are people who need certain accommodations and they need to be brought in and brought together and included. But we can all identify with those moments where we don't feel included, where we aren't being accommodated or something feels uncomfortable and that we don't want to say anything. I know that I still don't identify while I'm looking for work all the time, I don't identify where it asks, do you voluntarily disclose that you have a disability? And I always say no, because I don't know what they're going to use with that information. And is it necessary? Will it stop me from being able to work? No, it will not stop me from being able to work because I came up with accommodations for myself that will work. And sometimes you have to be your own self-advocate, but wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to?
Yeah, Dawn, I want to follow up on what you said about it would be nice if we don't have to be our own self-advocate, because I can tell you, and just from my experience, not having had disabilities all my life, except for, I guess, being autistic when I didn't realize I was, but the other disabilities that I developed later in life, even just for the last 15 years or so, however long it's been, it can be exhausting constantly having to speak up and ask for things. And so when I have worked with people who would do that for me, it was so nice. Just be sure that if you are advocating for someone else, that you truly understand what their needs are. I had a coworker who would always stand up for me. And if she saw someone about to take out a granola bar that had chocolate chips in it or something, chocolate is one of my allergies, she would say something to them. So I'm constantly vigilant. If I have to be out around people, I'm constantly watching what they're eating or drinking, or because I have to. But it's so helpful when she would say that. But we've had other folks, like my husband also has airborne allergies. One of his is natural rubber latex. One of his is peanuts. And I know at a family gathering years ago, we had to leave abruptly because someone brought a dessert with peanut butter in it. And she said, well, I asked my dad if it would be okay for you. And he said, yeah, as long as you don't eat it. And we were just like, why didn't you ask us directly? But also, why did he answer when he didn't know the answer? So make sure you're not answering for anyone with a disability if you don't truly know the answer. Advocacy is really great, but also make sure you understand what the issues are.
I like that they took it for you, that you don't always have to be the one to say something. I like that when I introduce myself, I'll say that I use they, she, they pronouns. so that my child doesn't have to be the first one to say it.
Mhm.
Nobody needs
Oh,
to
I
be
like that. Yeah.
so
I
that
like
it allows it sets the precedent and the expectation. Sort of like if somebody's going to come to my home and they want to eat, and I say, do you have any dietary restrictions, or we're going to be serving vegan or vegetarian, is that enough, is that acceptable for you, is there anything else that you'd like, so that it already puts it out there without them needing to broach the subject. So I think it's always good to show as, for lack of a better term, an ally or an advocate, to let there be an opening and let them know, anybody that's coming into this space, if you're going to have a training, what are your pronouns if you'd like to disclose them? What do you prefer to have, a certain kind of chair? Do you need certain kind of lighting? Would you prefer to have pen and paper, or would you prefer to have your laptop with you? Just being able to do this without saying, hey, is it because you have a sensory issue? Do you have a food allergy? Do you have processing challenges? You don't need to ask it. If you phrase it as, these things are available and we're happy to accommodate, what would you like to choose? Going back to Daphne's point, you give them a choice that allows them to choose freely and not have to disclose why. It's just, that's what they prefer.
I would also like to add, when we talk about those choices, because hopefully in the workplace, many training and development, we are leaders in our company. We know the powers that be. Be an advocate on the other side. I teach part-time also at a college, and I have had schools that first started yesterday. We introduced with our pronouns, but I noticed several students were like, okay, here, because I say, what would you rather be called? Because everything says Prasanna, and that's not me. And so they'll give me, and then we do a follow-up. I finally, after several years of this, went to the college and was like, if my students have a preferred name, surely there's a way we can change it in Blackboard or in the HRIS system. Find out that, because so often they don't know, and then let them know. So there are ways that we can still help them to pave the way for them to make it easier.
Exactly. Thanks so much for saying that, Chris, because I know with my daughter, not only the pronouns, but also the name, that, at their any job they've had, they've just kind of accepted that, oh, well, people are going to call me this name. And they try to say, no, call me this. But then, like the paycheck says something else, and any sort of learning management system says something else. So if we in L&D can at least help with some of that, see if we can, get the name changed in the learning management system so that it's their actual, sorry, the word is escaping me right now. It's not necessarily preferred, but the chosen name.
But not their dead name.
Their authentic name. Yes. Yes.
Correct.
You don't want to dead name people.
Don't dead name people, right?
And for those who may not be familiar with the term dead name, that is the name that they were given, not their authentic name.
Cyndi, do you ever have a trouble with that when you're dealing with, because you're, I think, the one that is dealing most with lots of people all around the country, do you have problems of writing their name correctly?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, we have many countries, employees that are cross-functional teams. We make consumer electronics products, so we may have designers here and engineers here, but we're working with the people that are actually putting these products together or testing these products in other parts of the world, and names, colloquialisms. I can't even say it, common phrase. The phrases that might be common in here that are completely make no sense to other parts of the world. So, we actually use a company called Talera. They do cross-cultural communication workshops to help highlight some of these things. Like I said, I'm a team of one. So for me, having a resource like them that can already provide this content, and they have access to pre-made content, is great. But they have some free workshops. You can check those out. They do provide a lot of really good training around that. So I'll put a link in the chat. So
that'd be great.
It definitely comes up.
How do you handle when this is, it's kind of like having the dead name, authentic name issue. But how do you handle when people are trying to pronounce each other's names correctly? Because sometimes people do and miss, and sometimes people don't, and they're just like, I'm going to call you this. And it's like, no, no. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, we actually we use Teams. So within Teams, you can put your phonetic naming in there. You can even put it with audio. So you can record it
Really?
and have it be in there. So that's one way. We can also put in where we're joining from. So if it's another time zone, if that type of thing, so you know what country is joining. All of our meeting tools have the ability to provide transcripts and also automated language translation. Zoom, Teams, they both do that. So, we do the best we can. So,
no, I didn't know about the recorded audio. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a really big help. Because sometimes it's hard when you're just spelling it.
Yeah, it can be tough.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So I know that we're coming up on the hour, but I wanted to check in and see if there's anything else that you would want to contribute. This has been really lovely. So thank you very much for joining in the conversation, and thank you to everybody in the chat. Also, I've been reading it and looking back, and there's just been such really self-expressive and reflective information, and everyone's being just very supportive and sharing of each other in a genuine way. So I want to acknowledge you for that. Thank you. And I hope everybody felt included in our conversation.
I think it's so nice that that we can share in this way and create this safe space where everyone feels so comfortable. And it's hard. Hindsight is 2020, but I think about all of these things that I could have done as a teacher, and just wish that this had been the norm then. And so I'm excited for the future of creating inclusive and accessible learning environments for the students or learners who I will have in the future. But I can't help but feel like sometimes when you hear from someone in the chat or from some of the other people up here, it's just so nice. The personal element makes it come alive. Hearing a story is so much more impactful than seeing the numbers. Okay, 26% have a reported disability, but that doesn't hit in the same way that hearing someone's personal experience does. So thank you, everyone, for sharing your personal experiences, because it does, the things that come to the heart are so much stronger than the things that come to the mind and then so I'm thinking with a different part of the body.
I'm very glad that we were given the Maya Angelou quote from the last session, which is that, and I can't say it off the top of my head, but being, you do what you can until you know better. And once you know better, you do better. And that's what I think we're all on that journey. Mm-hmm. So perfect. Thank you very, very much. I see Lewis is back.
I'm back. Wow. Thanks so much for your contribution. All the panelists were absolutely amazing. Daphne, what you just said really resonated with me, because just building this community, what was important to me was the stories. I think that's what is a little different about what we're trying to do versus, other organizations, professional development organizations, is that I constantly am trying to explore and learn more about the people that populate the L&D space, because we're all just individuals trying to figure all of this out. And I feel like each one of us is an incredible resource to one another. And that's really kind of the core of TLDC. So it's nice that you brought that up. And it's taken a while even just for me to figure that out. But I do know that from the beginning, it's always been about everyone's stories. So, and I love that all of you were able to share things about yourself and have other people connect. likewise. So with that, thank you again for doing this. Is great as a pop-up session. I don't think it's ever happened before with any of our TLDC events that we've pulled something together so quickly. So Dawn, amazing job. And everyone, Daphne, Chris, Kayleen, Cyndi, thank you for participating in this. And everybody, there were some great resources that were posted in the chat. So hopefully we'll be collecting all of those and be sharing them out. I do want to mention we have one more session left for today with Amy Morrissey of Artisan Learning. I don't know if you know of Amy and Diane Elkins of Artisan, but they are kind of definitely industry leaders in L&D. They when it comes to talking about inclusion and accessibility, I think it feels like, especially Diane, she's one of the go-to people. So, and Amy is the president of Artisan Learning. So I'm really looking forward to her presentation, which is coming up in about an hour. 8 things you can do tomorrow to make your e-learning more accessible. So please come back for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the session out, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Bye, everybody.